about 8 minutes or 10 minutes, and then have one person present it to the thing. He writes to me, I write my questions, he writes back. I have other colleagues who are lovers of Ibn Arabi, and they help me along the way. So that's how I progressed through this text.
And secondly, you said that Ibn Arabi well connected with is also connected with other works like Futuhal and another works of Ibn Arabi. You agree all of them?
Right. So in chapter 1, we're going to look at the chapter 1 is the vision of the youth. Now, the vision of the youth is one that we'll see is the entire Futuhal of Makiyah comes from that vision. However, as he's writing, he says, well, I talked about this in Tanazzulat al-Mawsiliyah, I talked about this in Anqa, or I talked about this in other kinds of books. So he does reference his own books, but he says, if you want, I talked about this in Mabadi, in Mabadi about numbers. He said, if you want to see this, go to that book. But he makes sure that the Futuhal has everything you need. Now, the Futuhal is very interesting because after I read Futuhal for now 4 years, every single day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, I understand his style very easily. Very easily understand what he's saying. Like it's boom, 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 I know exactly what he's saying. And the style that he's saying it. Then if I read Futuhal, I say, whoa, this isn't the same author. Because it's not the same author, because Ibn Arabi says the Futuhal was given to word by word. Whereas the Futuhal was given to him as images, which he then used as his own writing to describe. So the Futuhal isn't Ibn Arabi's work, but it is his work, but it's not his in the sense that he received it and he wrote it down. So the Futuhal is authentic Ibn Arabi, but it's not his style, because he didn't write it personally, whereas he wrote it. Now that's the question for a lifetime. The question of the lifetime is to try to see which things are good, which things are bad, and why they are good and why they are bad. And the question of the lifetime is to say, how is it that the Jahannam, the people going to Jahannam, can be considered by Ibn Arabi to have their own Rahman, if they're getting Rahman. And so that's the question of the lifetime. And I'll just give some of the things that I've been able to see as I've come along here. Ibn Arabi has many passages where he describes that the ultimate end of everything has to be Rahmah. And so Rahmah will overcome the Ghadab, the anger. And so Rahmah is the top, is the king, is the first, and the last. And then everything will end up being ultimately in a place of kindness and goodness. So he knows that, and he says that, and he spends a whole chapter telling us about how the people of the fire, that the fire is both bitter cold and very hot, because Jahannam has those two ones, bitter cold and very, very hot. And he says that the fire is, in this dunya, is a good thing. It's like cauterization. If you break your arm in those days and your hand would actually come off, you would have to cauterize the skin to stop the blood from bleeding out. So the cauterization, firing and burning the skin, would save the person's life. So the fire would save the person's life. So he says the people who are the mu'minun, the faithful people, the hudud do that for them. The hudud look like it's a horrible, terrible thing, but the hudud saves them. It keeps them from having punishment in the next world. So the moment the had has been taken on them, there's no more punishment for them in the next world. But the people who don't get the had or the hudud, they're going to have to go into that other world and get their punishment there. And he says, so the fire is a necessary thing for life. So the fire makes sure that you can have life and you can continue to exist. So he said all of these things about the fire, all these things about Jahannam, being Rahmah, and then he says, because the adab is the torment or the punishment, the adab is the adab. And so the adab goes into udhab. So the adab is that adab goes to udhab, which is sweet water. So torment becomes sweet water. And he says, so that when the people of Jahannam are there, and anyone who is not the person of the Jannah, anyone of the Jahannam, anyone who is not the Jannah, will be pulled out of the Jahannam and placed into the Jannah. And what happens is, they are the people of Kabair, they have done the horrible, huge bad things, and so they get burnt to a crisp. They get burnt past the ashes. And then those ashes are then taken by the angels and thrown into the river in the Jannah. And in the river, those ashes grow back up and become beings once again. And then they are assigned their places in the Jannah. When those last people have been taken out, the Jahannam is only for her people. The Ibn Arabi says Jannah and Jahannam are two sisters. Each has their own people. So their own people are now there. And the moment everyone has been taken out who doesn't belong there, the Jahannam turns into a sweet place. And everyone there has the kindness of Allah. So Ibn Arabi says that whole thing beautifully, wonderfully, and at the end he says, I hope Allah will never put me in the fire. So that's because it's the haqiqah. From one perspective, we know that they will, of course, have rahmah in there. On the other perspective, thank God he put me in the Jannah. Please put me in the Jannah. Don't put me there. And so that's the differences. Now, Ibn Arabi keeps telling us that the ayn wahda, the ayn is one, wahda. And so the way the ayn wahda works is rahmah, and rahmah is one. And so, like this heat of the sun. Now, for someone who is hot-tempered, the hot sun is something he doesn't like. He says, it's too hot, go away from me, sun. And the person who is cold says, oh, I like the heat of the sun. So Ibn Arabi says the heat, the sun is the same thing. For one constitution, it's too hot. For another constitution, it's just right. And he says the same way with the Ahl Jannah and the Ahl Jahannam. They have two constitutions. So the same rahmah will be for both the peoples, but for these people it will be warming and comfortable, and these people will say, oh, thank goodness it's not burning me up. And so the same thing has two different effects. And so that's why it says the ayn is wahda. There's the rain, when the rain comes down, the rain is the rahmah of Allah, but when it sweeps your house away in a flood, it's not, for you at that moment, it's not a rahmah. But it doesn't mean that rain is not a rahmah. It means that for you, in that moment, there was something that's not good for you. And so he says that the process of the Jahannam, all of the torments that are described, the process is to create them so that their constitutions become a single constitution which can receive the rahmah of Allah in the right way. And that takes time, it takes burning, it takes torment, it's very difficult. But then we know that for the moment, the world is a difficult place. And we have balai and sicknesses and trials that we didn't earn, and so we get them, and those are things that make us purified, that make us stronger and better. So, but it's just beautiful how that beautiful statement about how Jahannam is going to be so wonderful, and then he says, but God make me one of the people of Jannah. So the first hierarchy is pre-cosmos, and that's in the mist. And that hierarchy is, and Ibn Abi, you can tell he's not a philosopher, because he says, what I'm talking about now is called the qalam, pen, or the aql al-awwal, or the normal habit. And he says, call it whatever you want. This is what we're talking about. Now, no philosopher will ever tell you that you can define anything the way you want to define it. And no philosopher will always say that the qalam and the aql al-awwal are somehow the same thing. So he's saying, call it the qalam, call it the aql al-awwal, call it the normal habit. This is what we're talking about. So the first hierarchy is normal habit, that or the aql al-awwal or the qalam. And that's the first one to recognize Allah. So the first one to recognize God is the Nur Muhammad, and that's why the Nur Muhammad is the Mahbub, the one who is the loved one. And that first recognition is from there. And of course, as the Nur Muhammad was a Nabi before, Adam was before between clay and water, therefore, all the laws that come from any of the prophets and messengers are the laws of Muhammad. And all the people who are messengers and prophets in this world, after the creation began, they are his deputies. They are doing it for him. They are his deputies. And so he is at once, his authority, the Risala, and his wilayah. His authority is Batin, because we can't see him, he's Muhammad. Then it becomes Zahir when he is born. And then after he dies, it is now Batin again. So, but it's still, the wilayah is all the way around the circle. And then the cosmology, the hierarchy of cosmology is the places that we go as we go into the womb of the mother and the womb of the mother earth. And so throne and Kursi and so on. And what he's done in book 12, he talks about all of the awliya who are in charge of all of these spiraling down beings. And they are in charge of it. The first one is the Qutb, and the second one are the Imamain, so 1, 2, 4, the Al-Tad, the Hags, the northwest, southeast, and then the 7 Abdal, the substitutes or alternates, the Nujaba, 12, and then there are 300 who are on the Qalb of Adam, and then there's one with the Hawa, and on and on and on. And he goes down through all of these, and these are actually, they are awliya, but they're also letters. They're also letters and numbers. So the Qutb is the number 1 and the letter Alif. And then the next are the 2 are the Waw and the Ya. And these are called the weak letters. Because you have the Hamza, Waw, Ya, which are the weak letters. So you have the 2 there. And so he goes down through this hierarchy of how the letters go from Alif and then filter all the way down through the cosmos. And at the end, he gives you all that they add up to 590 awliya, or letters, which are the medium through which every being passes through the cosmos. 590 times 40 divided by 28 gives you the number of the darajat of Tawbah, 413. So what happens is that the darajat of Tawbah and all the other things are all related to the ghulam, or the awliya, as they come down through the cosmos, spiraling down. So, and these numbers are very mysterious numbers. He mentions them, he cites them, but then he doesn't spend time to tell us what they mean. And I spent about 2 years discovering what one of the numbers means. And I'm still working on waiting for the understanding of some of the other numbers. One of the numbers that's very interesting is 31, because he says that the Arif and the Arifin and the Makiyah, so the two kinds of advanced people. There's a difference of 31 between their darajat of Tawbah, darajat of Shukr, darajat of all of these other ones. And there's a difference of 31. Now 31 is an interesting number because 32 is the combinatoric of 5. So if you said, so what happens is the Malami don't have 31 darajat that the Arifin have. And that's because the Malamiya are people who don't recognize themselves. They can't see themselves. They can't recognize who they are. And if they can't recognize who they are, that means their 5 senses, there's some issue going on with their 5 senses. And if you take eye, hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, the 5 senses. So if you take 1, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, and then 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 4, 1, 2 and 5, 1, 2, 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3 and 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get 31. So the senses, if they don't have information coming through their senses, they miss 31 darajat of all of the stages and all of the stages. Edition of Dr. Sultan Mansour became available, and I asked, where can I find it? And somebody said, incidentally, use my chip. Oh, there we go. So in 2012, I was asking where can I find a typical edition of the Futuhal Makiyah, the new one that was the complete one that was made in Sana'a, Yemen. And Dr. Mansour just sent me the entire 12 volumes. And so with that, once I got those 12 volumes, I quit everything and started working directly on the translation of the Futuhal Makiyah. And right now, I have 12 books published in preprint out of the 37 books of the Makiyah. So the 37 books are about 10,000 pages, and the 12 books that I have right now are almost 4,000 pages. And I'll go ahead and just, I hope that the library will soon have all the 12 books, but until then, go ahead and just have a look at these just to see what we're looking at as we go. Of course, Osman Yahya, he died. He was in Sorbonne in Paris, and he was able to complete 14 books. And then after that, no one else was able to finish the critical edition until Abdulaziz Mansour came along. And he spent about 11 years working with the 3 handwritten manuscripts that have Ibn Arabi's signature after every juz. So after every juz, there's a signature of Ibn Arabi and an ijazah of some of the people there. And also you can see that the manuscript has some kind of notes that Ibn Arabi writes to make sure that everything is correct. So he spent about 11 years preparing the first critical edition, and then he did some more work to improve upon any kind of mistakes. And the final version was 2010. And his work is absolutely amazing. So when I was writing to him, I would ask him questions, and he would be able to answer the most beautiful way possible. When you're writing a critical edition, you're seeing the letters without the vowel signs, and so you have to understand what this word is. So like qadam and qidam, you can't tell the difference in the manuscript. Is this qadam or is this qidam? And so I would sometimes write to Mansub and ask him, what's the situation here? And he would answer back with a beautiful explanation of why this word is the way it is and how it fits into the entire paragraph, the entire passage. And this is the beauty of Ibn Arabi's work, is that as you're reading and studying, everything becomes connected to everything else. It's a beautiful and engaging and exciting work to be working with. So for 4 years, I've done nothing but 8 to 10 hours a day of working on the translation. I start early in the morning, I keep going, take breaks throughout the day, and this is what I work on. And so, up to date, there's been no translation of the Makiyah. There's the Turkish one is mostly Arabic Turkish. It's not an understanding of the text. It doesn't really help you understand the text. There's a partial one in Urdu. There's Urdu one. Every time you come to a difficult area, you just Arabicize the Urdu and skip over. And scholars as well have gone into the Futuhal and they try to understand what they're seeing there. In most translations that you see passages, you only see small passages. And in those small passages, you'll see dot, dot, dot a lot of times. So, and that's because they'll be saying everything is pretty clear for a while, and suddenly dot, dot, dot means I don't understand what's happening here in this passage. And then they continue when they do understand it. So the book has been, the Futuhal of Makiyah has been very poorly understood, has not been understood. There are only a handful of people in the world today who have read the entire Futuhal of Makiyah, and there's a very small number of people who actually understand what's happening in the Futuhal of Makiyah. So this has been an amazing project, 4 years, close to half, and chapter 1, for instance, I've revised it 200 or 300 times, and so it's an amazingly deep and engaging work. So that's the Futuhal of Makiyah, and we'll start entering into this Futuhal of Makiyah and find out what it is, what's happening in this work. So, now the first thing that needs to be understood by the Futuhal of Makiyah is that chapter 1 is, in essence, the beginning of the book, because it's the beginning of the vision. And chapter 1 has been very little understood. Almost no one has ever translated anything from chapter 1. It is as if chapter 1 doesn't really exist. The only thing that Western scholars have translated from the Futuhal in detail is the Muqaddimah. The Muqaddimah, 40 or 50 pages, whatever it is. But the Muqaddimah, in other words, is the most important word. Sure, the Muqaddimah is important for other people's works. But for Ibn Arabi's work in the Futuhal of Makiyah, the Muqaddimah is so unimportant that he says that this is like an ilawa. And an ilawa is what you do when the camel is fully loaded, ready to go, has everything it needs, and you put a few more things on it. That's the ilawa. And so Ibn Arabi says at the end of the Muqaddimah, this has been the Muqaddimah, it is like the ilawa on the camel. If you like, write it down when you copy the Futuhal of Makiyah, and if you like, you can omit it. So the Muqaddimah is so important, you can write it down if you want, you can not write it if you like. So Western scholars have studied the Muqaddimah, which is actually the part that is barely to be considered part of the Futuhal of Makiyah, and they've ignored chapter 1, which is the basis of the Futuhal of Makiyah. So we'll start first with we're trying to understand the idea of what story or understanding needs to be had before the Futuhal of Makiyah makes sense. And so we'll start with the general introduction. So the chapter general introduction, we're going to be looking in both areas right now. Ibn Arabi, the way to understand the Makiyah is to understand the story of why everything is, the story of creation, why we're here, what we're doing, and all these things. And to understand that, you need to understand the very beginning. The beginning, the foundation, is the place to start. The beginning and the foundation is the mist, al-a'ma. This a'ma is a cloud or a mist. And of course, a mist or a cloud is made by warm, moist air. So Ibn Arabi says the first thing that happens is who? There is a breath, there is a sigh. And this is a sigh of longing, of wanting something, of irada. Irada is wanting something. So this sigh creates this mist, a warm, moist mist. And in this mist, the beginnings of all creation are beginning. And that sigh comes out because, as we have in the Hadith Qudsi, Allah says, I am a hidden treasure. I am a treasure that has been concealed. So Allah is a treasure that has been concealed. That's very important. It's not, just not hard to find. It's actually concealed. It's meant to be concealed. However, I love to be recognized. And the word recognize is crucial for Ibn Arabi because Arafah, Arif, the place of Arafat, Irfan, all of these things are recognitions. Now, if you know something, you encompass it and you know all of it. But if you recognize something, you just see where it is and you know what it is, but you don't know it. And so Ibn Arabi is saying recognition is very important here. Allah says, I love to be recognized. So then the third line is, so I created the creation. So I created the creation. And I introduced myself to them. So introduce myself to them is the arif. We all know arif to make each other arifs of each other. So mutual recognition. The arif is when there's two mutual recognitions happening. So I introduced myself to them and they recognized me. So the beginning of the mist is I am a treasure that has been concealed, but I love to be recognized. So that love is of something that doesn't exist. So all love is something that doesn't exist. Now the key to understanding Ibn Arabi is to take out the idea of morality and good and bad and look at all of the things that happen around us as forces, like the force of gravity. So is the force of gravity good or bad? Well, it's just the force of gravity. It's what it is. Now, we like it when it helps us walk nicely, and we hate it when it makes us fall and we hurt ourselves. But gravity is gravity. It's a force. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. And the same way with love. Love is a force. It's something that happens. It's not, you don't talk about, or you can't get distracted about what's good of it or what's bad of it. So for Ibn Arabi, the love of money, love of wealth, love of fame, love of mother, love of child, love of this person or that person or this thing or that thing, it's all the same. It's a love. And we'll look at how that works in a few minutes. So this love is for something that doesn't exist. You only love what doesn't exist. Okay, so when you want something, this irada, this wanting something, is of something that isn't there, that doesn't exist, that you don't have in your hand. Okay? So if you have something in your hand, that's not love anymore. Love is for what is out there, not yet being, it's not next to you, it's not there, it's not happening. That's what love is all about. And that's why we always have a love of something that we can't see. We have love of things that aren't existing or aren't there. And so love then is the first gravity of the universe. It's the first force of the universe. And so the love is wanting something that isn't there. the sigh for something that isn't there, the warm, moist mist that comes up around the sigh, and wanting something to be. So we know from the Quran that when Allah wants something to be, He wants something to be, He says, kun fayakun. Now, when He wants irada, something, some shay, something to be. Now, the first love for things that don't exist, you need to have a thing, so things that don't exist, or non-existence, then suddenly becomes things. Then we all become things. And this is the shay that when Allah wants something to be, He says, kun fayakun. So the first stage is to be going out of the void, the void, the emptiness, and becoming wajid, becoming found. So wujud is being found. And so now when you are found, you are a thing. And then that thing listens and has his ears prepared to hear kun fayakun. So Ibn Arabi makes the point that there was nothing that was commanded with the amr of kun, but it became. So every particle, every being, every particle, every atom, everything in the universe, everything maswa, everything other than God, is an obedient being, because it obeyed the command to be and it became. So this is how Ibn Arabi says that all of creation is Muslim, because all of the creation is a site for Islam, for submission to the command and obedience to the command. So from this first breath, and we get this sigh, this first love, we get the things that come out, and then those things are then told to be, and they become. Now the first, one of the key hadith about this mist or this cloud is kana Allah wa la shema'ahu. Kana Allah wa la shema'ahu. And Ibn Arabi says this is how we understand this hadith. Kana Allah, in many languages you have past, present, and future. And so many people in European languages, English translate that God was. And as you'll know, that it's not a was, it's a perfect. And so it's an is, always is, and always will be, and always has been. So Allah always is, always has been, always is. Allah is, and there is no thing, la shay ma'ahu. Now what happens is that Allah, when you hear the word Allah, we need to understand that it's the Ismail Jaya, it's the comprehensive name, it's the name that gathers all the other names. That's just gathering all of the names. So the Ismail Jaya is the gathering of all the names. And Ibn Arabi tells a story about how the names get together and talk amongst themselves. And so Qadir, for instance, the name Al-Qadir says, here I am Al-Qadir, and I have no one who I can do my qudra on. I have no one I have qudra or power over. So what should we do? And they said, well, that's a good point. Let's go talk to the next name. We go to Al-Murid. And when they see Al-Murid, they say, we have a situation here. Here is Qadir, but he has nothing to put his qudra on. What should we do? And Murid said, I am in the same situation. I have irada, but there's nothing that I can have irada for. So they said, we need to go to the next name. They go to the next name, they go to an alim, and the alim says, I hear your situation. I too am in a similar situation. I am the alim, but I have nothing that is ma'lum, nothing to be known. It is the power of my ilm onto that being. And so alim says we have a protocol. The protocol is that we take this to the Ismail Jami, we take this to the comprehensive name. So they take this to the comprehensive name Allah. And when they get to the comprehensive name Allah, they say, here's our situation. We have nothing to be doing our names onto. We have no sultan from our names onto something. And so the name Allah says, wait here. And so Ibn Arabi says the name Allah then goes to the presence and from the presence. Hadra. Of course, Hadra in Arabic is a feminine form. So when you talk about Hadra, you say she, because it's a feminine noun. So Allah comes and says, I have just come from Hadra. I have just come from Hadra. And she says that it's time for us to begin the creation. And so the creation begins, and now all of these beings and particles are told to kun fayakun, be, and they become. And suddenly, Dir has something he can have qudrat over, and Mana has something he can restrain from, and Basit has something he can expand, and Abid has something he can constrict. So all the names are happy that they now have something they can act on. So now we hear the phrase Wakan Allah Ma'hu, which means Allah is, and there is no thing with who. So Ma'hu doesn't mean with him or dia, it means with who. And who is Huwiya. The Huwiya is also a feminine noun. Huwiya is a feminine noun, and it is for the Dhat, and Dhat is a feminine noun. So the Dhat is the who, is the Huwiya, is the feminine noun, and so we have the Ism al-Jami, the comprehensive name, is, and there is no thing ma'hu, there's no thing with the who. And that's because the who is outside of the mist. Okay? In fact, the who is outside of the mist, and the breath of who made the mist. Okay? So now we have that first situation. We have the beings are coming into being, and they're all becoming, they're all obedient because they've come into being. And once they're becoming into being, they're now in a situation where they have a tajalli. So the first thing they have is something they hear. The second thing they have is something they see. So hearing is prior to seeing. So the first thing they see is the tajalli of the Arab. And the Arab here means the cherished one who raises you up. So a parent is someone who's the Rabbat and does the raising, the Rabbat of the child. So raising and taking care of and helping, that's what a Rabb is. And so the first question is, in this tajalli here is the Rabb and Alastu bi rabbikum wa qalu bala. So Alastu bi rabbikum wa qalu bala. And so in Arabic, when you have a negative, and you want to negate the negative, you say no. So bala means no. But in English and other languages, to negate the negative, you say yes. So that's the Arabic bala. In English is yes. They all say yes, that you are Arabic. So the second stage, all the beings recognize who the Rabb is, and the Rahmah of Allah is shown by the state of the question. The question itself has the concept of talqeen, of coaching. That is and so coaching, or giving you the answer to help you give the right answer, is part of the rahmah of Allah. And so this coaching allows us to answer yes, because it's not an essay question, it's not a multiple choice question, it's a very easy question because we can coach to give the answer. All we have to do is say, whatever you said, that's what I agree with. And so we say bala, or in English, yes. So the first thing we do is we accept and we listen and obey to the amr of kun, fayakun, and the second thing we see and we agree that we are recognizing the Rabb. So Ibn Arabi is saying the first two tests that we're given, we are obedient and we obey. And he said that the wonder and the beauty of accepting the first two commands and answering the question correctly is enough to last you for eternity, all your existence. And so all things, their final destination will be the rahmah of Allah, because all things were obedient and all things recognized the rahmah. So from that that scene or that event, all beings now trickle through the cosmos. And so the Arabi has the vision of spiraling, which is really like a helix, spiraling down through this cosmos into the womb that you are born. So the first place you get to in the cosmos is the throne. Now the throne is where Ar-Rahman is al-Arsh. The Arsh is settled on by the name Ar-Rahman. Because the name Ar-Rahman settles on the throne, all of the cosmos is under the authority of Rahman. So Rahman is the basis and the final authority of the entire cosmos. The name Al-Mutaqim or Mane or Dar or any of those other names don't sit on the throne. Ar-Rahman sits on the throne. So all existence is under the authority of Ar-Rahman, and therefore will all have a final destination of Rahman, whichever the final destination is. Because 2 handfuls went in to pull out of Adam. 1 handful said, these are the people for Jannah, these are the people for Jahannam. And Adam has told us that the 2 hands of my Lord are right hands. So it's a good fortune to be the Ahl al-Jannah. It's a good fortune to be the Ahl al-Jannah, because both of the hands that pulled you out were right hands. So this is the separation. And so we separate into this, and we come through the cosmos, and when we hit the dunya, we start to be mixed. And so dunya is a place of mixture. Everything is mixed. Everything good has something bad in it. Everything bad has something good in it. And that's the mixture of dunya. That is by mixture. And so when a house is punished, the fitna is that the people of the house may be punished for being kufar, for being ungrateful, and not recognizing their God. But there may be people in that house who are good, but they will also experience punishment. And that's because in dunya, there's a mixture. And so after death, outside the dunya, that's when things are separated again. And only punishment goes to those who deserve punishment. But in this world, punishment, pain, bala, trials, tribulations, all of that occurs to everyone, whether they are obedient people or disobedient people, whether they're grateful people or ungrateful. So the first place we touch is the Arsh. The second place that comes is the Kursi. And the Kursi is where is a footstool. So there are 2 legs, there's 2 feet. One is do this, and one is don't do that. So that's taklif. Taklif comes when you must do this and when you must not do that. Now, Ibn Arabi says that this process of coming through the cosmos before we enter the womb is corresponding to the process of our life in the dunya. So if we get caught on the kursi and we have trouble on the kursi, we're going to have trouble in the dunya as well. The trouble on the kursi is that we've come from Alastu bi Rabbikum Ta'ala. Wonderful thing, we answered correctly. We got an easy question, we answered it correctly. The second thing we see is Ar-Rahman, the name Ar-Rahman, on the throne of the cosmos. And then the third thing we see is do this and don't do this. So, what Ibn Arabi says, this corresponds to our life in the dunya, because when we come out of the womb, we look at our mother, and the mother says that we are loved. And you're loved, you see Rahman, because the Rahim, the womb, is Rahman. And so coming out of that, we are in a place of love. But very soon, maybe 1 year or 6 months or 18 months, suddenly we're told, do this and don't do this. So we ask ourselves, I thought you loved me. So why is my mother now telling me do this and don't do that? And that is the problem of the kursi. If we get stuck in the kursi, we will get stuck with this conditional and unconditional love. We'll get stuck with someone telling us, I love you if you do this, and I'll love you if you don't do that, and I won't love you if you do that, and I won't love you if you do, and so on. So we get into trouble at the kursi. And then there are other places that as we go through the cosmos, we touch the planets and the asteroids and the comets and the different celestial bodies, the aflaq that's circling bodies. And whatever place that we get stuck on, that will be a problem when we are in the dunya. So if we get stuck on Jupiter or Mars, when we get stuck on Mars, we're going to have trouble with aggression. We're going to have trouble with violence and aggression, the warrior. If we get stuck on Venus, our downfall will be the beauty and nice things and good things and luxury. So depending on where we get stuck, that determines how we will have to, the challenges that we will have when we are in dunya. So we go from this, we're through the cosmos, we're into the womb, and in the womb we are in a reasonably dark place, which is constricted. And after a while, we get bigger and bigger, and we use more and more resources, and after a while something has to give. We cannot sustain this existence for very much longer. And what happens is, the long tunnel opens, and at the end of that tunnel there's a light. We get moved to that light, and we come out into dunya. Now, the child for the first days and weeks and months will be sleeping 23 hours a day in spaces. And that sleeping is because it's a mercy from Allah, it's a rahmah from Allah, a kindness of God, that the child can be back in the other world, can go back into the other world in the dream state for most of its existence, until at some point it starts dreaming less and less, and starts forgetting more and more. And as it forgets and dreams less, it begins to think that dunya is the real world. And dunya is the place that is the only world. And they forget their dreams, they think they don't dream, they don't think their dreams mean anything, or they begin to forget the way things are, they begin to forget the other world, and so they're in a situation where they need dhikr. Dhikr is the remembrance of Allah, dhikr of Allah, and the best dhikr is la ilaha illallah, is the one that tells them that this world around you is not the only world, and it's not the true world. The haqq, the haqiqah, is in another place. You need to find that and remember that place. So we go through life and we either stay asleep and stay distracted, or we wake up. And so we are told to die before we die, which means wake up from your dream life and realize that you are in a dream. And the Bible will say then if you wake up from that dream, you'll know that you're in another dream. So it keeps going. And then towards the end, we die and go into a dark place which is constricted. And we're in this dark, constricted place. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the constriction of this place, for those who have good fortune and have done good things in their life, that constriction is like the constriction of the womb. It's not too hard. It's a good constriction. For those who have not done well, that constriction is painful. It's a terrible experience in the grave. So at some point, that existence becomes untenable. Something has to give. So a long tunnel is opened up, and at the end of that long tunnel, there's a light, and we enter into that light, and we say, that world there was a dream. I've just woken up. And of course, you only understand the dream and can only interpret the dream after you wake up. You can't interpret the dream while you're still dreaming. But when you wake up, you look back and say, that's what this dream meant. So we look back at the world and we say, that's what my life meant. So you only know your life's meaning after you wake up. Either you wake up in this world or you wake up with death. But only then do you see the value and the measure of your life. And that's because the metaphor that I'll use is an upside down iceberg. You got a tip of the iceberg and the bulk of the iceberg. And so this upside down iceberg, we only see the tip. And yet the real iceberg, the biggest part of it, is the part that we don't see. So in amal, something that we do, we see it, and then there's fana. It disappears right away. You do something, you give a sadaqah, and then a few minutes later, you can't see it anymore. But the amal of that sadaqah is baqa. It lasts forever in the other world. And so it lasts forever in the other world, and it is the meaning of your life. So when we die in the grave, these amal, these actions, and these sadaqah, these good things that we've done, will come to us like a handsome form, a handsome being. And bad things will come to us like a bad being, an ugly thing. So that's why the truth of the matter, or the truth of this dream, is that we only understand it once we've woken up. So wake up now, or wake up at death. And that waking up is like a kick, something that jerks you into waking. And so this kick, this idea of becoming, jerking into wakefulness, is the key to tasawwuf. We are told there are many ways that we can kick ourselves and be kicked to wake up. So that for Ibn Arabi is the beginning of this circle of how things work. Now, because when you love something that doesn't exist, the reason that it doesn't exist and what you love is because the ayn that you think you love has no full existence. So we think we love this ayn, we think we love this ayn, and we think we worship this ayn, and we think we worship this ayn. But the fact of the matter is, the ayn is wahda, is one, and it has no independent existence or independent reality. So therefore, all of the love that we have goes through the ayn and goes to the true place. It goes to Allah, and Allah has ghayrat, so that every love should be love of Allah. So everything we think we love, our love actually goes through the ayn that we think we love and goes to its true target, which is Allah. And everything we think we worship our worship goes through that ayn into the target, which is Allah. Because this is the verse, that Allah has, your Rabb has determined or resolved that you worship only whom? You only worship Allah. Only worship Him. Now the tafsir throughout the centuries, the Muslim tafsir have said there are two meanings of this verse. One is an amr, that means you should and you must worship only God. And the second is a statement of fact. Qada has a statement of fact. Allah has decided and resolved that you are worshiping only Him. And so Ibn Arabi says there's a world of difference between these two, because one of them says that you're able to not worship God, and that therefore you must be told to worship God. And the other perspective says you are worshiping God, you are worshiping Allah. There's nothing else to be worshipped. And of course, this is what we all should remember, La ilaha illallah. There is no ilah that can be worshipped except Allah, because there are no ilahs there that have any independent real existence. If you say this thing that you're worshiping is an ilah, and you are wrong to do that, and you're a kafir or a mushrik, whatever, you've just done shirk, because you've said that there's an ayn that is an ilah, when we've just been told that there is no ilah but Allah. So we think we worship that thing, but we are not worshiping that thing, because there's nothing there to be worshipped except Allah's thing to be worshipped. So this is the first basis, the first story that Ibn Arabi uses to help explain why we are here, what we are doing. That love is the first and fundamental force of the universe. It's what creates the universe, and it is why all of our feelings and our love are for something that isn't there. And if we are fortunate, then we will wake up and realize that the reason that everything we love isn't there is because we are loving Allah, and we will realize that everything we think we worship is Allah, and we're only worshiping Allah. So those are the people who are fortunate. It doesn't matter from the haqiqah perspective, or the perspective of Allah, the haqiqah perspective, whether you worship X, Y, or Z, or Allah, because the worship is going to Allah. But for you and me, it makes a difference whether we're worshiping X, Y, or Z. And it doesn't matter for Allah whether your love is for money, wealth, your mother, or something else, because all that love is going to Allah. But it matters for us. If I'm worshiping money, my life is miserable. If I'm worshiping and loving money and loving celebrity, I'll be miserable in my life. So it matters to me whether I worship and love in a good way or not. But from the haqiqah dimension, it doesn't matter, because whatever my love for money is still going to Allah. And that's why we want to see more love and more worship, and then you want to be able to be aware of where that worship and where that love is going. So that then becomes full circle. And so the full circle, I'll give you one more example. We are trying to recognize this truth as we go through life. And some of us recognize it, some of us don't. Let's look at the last person to recognize this truth. The last person on the Yom Al-Qiyamah standing and saying, well, where are the ones that I love? Because their mother is gone, their children are gone, their money is gone, their wealth is gone, their fame is gone, everything has gone away. So all the things they thought they loved are gone. And then all their idols that come up, and they say, oh, I worship that, I worship that, I worship that. And the idols say, we never told you to worship us. So Allah says, those idols are blameless. The idols can go because they never told you to worship them. They're not disobedient. You're the ones who are disobedient to worship them. And so the idols are gone, everything we loved is gone, there's nothing there. And at that moment, that last person will hear that I am a treasure that has been concealed, but I love to be recognized, so I created you and the creation, and I familiarized myself and introduced myself to you so that you would recognize me. So do you recognize me? And the last person will say, of course I recognize you, Allah. Of course I recognize you. There's nothing else to be loved. There's nothing else to be worshipped. It's only you. So illa hu. And so it's only who. So that who is the last thing that the last person ever says. It's the first thing that starts the entire process of the creation. So who is the beginning? It goes all the way around the circle, and it's the end, and then it circles again and again. And so the life and creation and all of these things are circular. They go round and around, and we know this from the name itself, Allahu. Allahu, and la ilaha illahu. And so Allah is the one who is la ilaha illahu. And so this who starts, and it goes all the way around, ends up Allahu, and then begins again, Allahu, and then it begins again. And the letters in their circle, the circle of the letters, starts with an alif or a hamza, which can't be seen. And this hamza or this alif is the normal hafid. And then what we get next is the ha, hu. And the ha goes all around and includes all of the letters until it gets to wa. Wa now is who sound. So who is the circle of letters. So who is Ismail Jamia Allahu? Because the Ismail Jamia circles all of the names and it circles all of the letters. So the who, there's the Nur Muhammad, the Alif, the Hamza, and there's a circle around from the Ha to the U, which is in Allahu. It all comes around, it's all a circle, and that's the comprehensiveness that Ibn Arabi tells us is seen everywhere we look. So everywhere we look, we see circles. Everywhere we look, we see Rahman, that the Nur Muhammad ﷺ started out with Rahman and is Rahim and Rahuf. So Bismillah Rahman Rahim, the Rahim there is Nur Muhammad, and that is, and at the end he is the Sayyid al-Nas, I am the master of the people, and the master of the people, not the master of the Muslims or not the master of this ummah or that ummah, the master of the people. So the beginning is Rahman and the end is Rahman. That's how the circle that Ibn Arabi sees. So what happens is throughout the Futuhal and Makiyah, Ibn Arabi refers to this story with words like alastu and words like the hu, the huiyah, and these are meant to help us remember this story that is the main story. Let's stop there for a minute and any kind of comments or questions that we can take. questions or
Sorry, my English is not so perfect. But I'm trying to understand the rules. Okay. You have good answer. My first question is, when you translate, you have some reference knowledge to understand.
So the first question is there a reference point or another book that will help understand the book of Makiyah? Well, I've read all of the books there are, including yours and everyone else. But what really happens is that when I read, translate, sentence by sentence, word by word, I go to understand the sentence. It doesn't help me to look at the translations or commentaries or anything like that. The only thing that helps understand is the Lisan al-Arab, the dictionary of the classical dictionary of Lisan al-Arab, and all of the grammars. So Sadra, all of the grammars. So to understand Ibn Arabi, we need to have the Arab language, and the Arab language being the lexicon, the Lisan al-Arab, and the grammars. So we have to understand what's happening. And what I've done is that while I was translating, I realized I was hearing Ibn Arabi in a way I've never heard before. Because in European languages, in English, the Ibn Arabi that you hear about is a philosopher and mystic and all of that. And I was finding he doesn't like philosophy and he's not a mystic. He's saying things in the clearest possible way. And so as I was studying him, I realized I had to take it seriously, to literally understand what he was saying. Because one of the things he says is that we have these latifa, these very subtle, almost invisible beings inside our stomach, we call the gut. And that these things inside the gut determine our physical health, our spiritual health, and our qurba, or proximity to Allah. Now, if no one has translated that before, but if they were to translate it, they may come up with a philosophy or a mystical something or something. But I read it very carefully with these classical dictionaries, and I said, this is what we now call gut bacteria. It's gut bacteria. You heard about probiotics. We train that. So what happens is that Ibn Arabi says that when you eat something that is bad for you, their amanat, their duty towards you, their sacred trust, their amanat, is to expel it through vomiting or burping. And if it is something good for you, their amanat, their sacred trust, is to digest it and bring it out through urination and bowel movements. And so when I read that very carefully and said, this is not, I'm going to read the words as they are, I realized he was talking about what we now call gut bacteria. Because gut bacteria determines our health. If you have poor gut bacteria, then you will not be healthy. One reason we want to be born through the normal channel instead of a C-section. I have one son who was born C-section and the other two were born normal way. The normal channel means that as the baby's coming out, they're getting all of the bacteria of the mother. And that helps them become stronger and helps them become immune to all the things that happen to them. And traditional people, when you meet, you either shake hands or you kiss. What does shaking hands and kissing do? It shares your bacteria. So if you hate somebody, don't shake their hand, don't kiss them, they won't get your bacteria. And then they'll get sick from something. And then that's so don't do that. So that's why we are trying to shake each other's hands and kiss, because that is the way we help each other out by sharing our bacteria. And so this is gut bacteria. And so you read this from 2010 were the first scientific reports about gut bacteria. So it's only 6 years that people have been talking in the scientific world about the importance of gut bacteria. And they say it makes your health, determines your health, it determines your emotions, and it determines your attitude. Now the health is what Ibn Arabi says, that it determines your physical health. Now when they say emotions, Ibn Arabi will say it determines your spiritual health. And then 3, they say attitude. Do you think the world is a good place or a bad place? He said that is your qurba to Allah, not closer to Allah. It's whether you see the world as a good place or as a bad place. Because ana in the zan abdi fala bi khair. I am according to the estimation of my abd. So let my abd have a good opinion of me, a good estimation of me. So all of this is something he talked about 800 years ago. It took 800 years before scientists said, oh, there's something called gut bacteria. It's very important. And he uses the word amana. They have an amana to us, which is amazing. And it tells you that when we take antibiotics and start killing them, that we are hurting them from following through with their amana. Their amana is to take care of us, and we're trying to kill them all the time. That's what modern man does. So I can't. When I was struggling with these sentences, I couldn't look at Shiddiq or Boris or the other books. It wouldn't help me. I had to go to the Arabic language. And then, of course, the assistance comes from other places.